Thanks everyone for attending class today, and as discussed, your homework tonight is to write a 5 million word blog post by tomorrow morning to demonstrate your eminence in social media. Excuse me sir, did you say 5 million? Yep Nick, sure did. Good luck. I think we're gonna need a little AI help for this one. GPT-2, here we come. What's happening guys? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use AI and natural language processing to be able to generate our own blog post just from a single sentence. Let's take a deeper look as to what we'll be going through. So in order to generate our blog post, we're going to be using a library called Hugging Face. So Hugging Face allows us to easily access a state-of-the-art natural language model called GPT-2. So using GPT-2, we're going to be able to pass through a sentence and have an entire blog post generated. It's quite powerful and allows you to do quite a fair few different types of things. So in order to do that, we're going to be first up setting up Hugging Face GPT-2. So we're going to install that and get it ready. Then what we're going to do is load up our model and encode our sentence. So once we've encoded our sentence, we can then pass it to our model and decode it and actually have our blog post generated. We'll then also export this so you can have it as a text file. Let's take a deeper look as to how this is all going to fit together. So first up, what we're going to be doing is installing Hugging Face transformers. So that's the name of the library for natural language processing. Then what we're going to be doing is preloading the GPT2-Large model. So this is going to give us a whole heap of power and grunt to be able to generate our blog posts. What we can then do is just pass through a single sentence for what we want our blog post to be about and have an entire blog post generated. You can configure how long you want the blog post to be, and you can actually export this out to a text file. So you can paste it up on your blog or push it out elsewhere. Ready to do it? Let's get to it. Alrighty, so in order to use Hugging Face transformers and natural language processing to be able to generate our blog posts, there's 5 key things that we need to do. So first up, what we need to do is install and import our dependencies. Then what we need to do is load our Hugging Face GPT2 model. Then what we're going to do is tokenize that sentence. So what this means is reduce it to individual words and then effectively encode them, which means convert them to a number representation. Then what we're going to do is generate our text and decode it. So we'll convert it from a number to its representative word, and then we'll output our result. So in order to actually do this, our core dependency is actually going to be Hugging Face transformers, and specifically, we're going to be using the GPT2 model. So this is readily available. You don't need access to a special API. It's all open source. You can actually start using this pretty easily. And as always, all the code that's been shown in this tutorial is going to be available via GitHub. Just check the link in the description below. But if you want to get access to it, you can just go to github.com/nicknocknack/generating-blog posts or -blog-post-with-GPT2-Large. Link's going to be available in the description below though. Alrighty, cool. On that note, let's actually start writing some code. So the first thing that we need to do is install and import our dependencies. Now our core dependency in this particular case is going to be Hugging Face transformers. So in order to install that inside of our notebook, we can just type in !pip install transformers to install it. So let's go on ahead and do it. Alrighty, so that's our core dependency installed. So in this case, we've installed transformers. Now I already had it installed, so it went pretty quick, but if you're doing it from scratch, it might take a little bit longer. So in order to do that, what we've written is !pip install transformers. And that's really it to be able to go on ahead and install transformers. Now the next thing that we need to do is actually import some dependencies. So let's go on ahead and do that. Alrighty, so those are our core dependencies imported. Now in this particular case, we've imported 2 key things, a model and we've also imported a tokenizer. So specifically what we've gone and imported is from transformers import GPT2 LM head model and GPT2 tokenizer. So let's take a quick step back and actually take a look at what these 2 things do. So our tokenizer is going to take our input text and encode it from a word to an effective number. What we're then going to do is pass it to the model, which is our GPT-2 model, and this is going to generate output tokens. So it's really going to generate numbers, and these numbers represent words or word sequences. we'll then use this tokenizer again to decode those numbers back to words. So effectively, we're getting words, converting it to numbers, passing it to the model. Model's going to generate new number sequences. We'll then pass it back to our tokenizer to decode it, and we're going to get an output sequence, which effectively represents a blog post. Now, the next thing that we need to do is actually go on ahead and load our model and our tokenizer. So let's go on ahead and do that. Alrighty, so that's our tokenizer and our model loaded. So we've written 2 lines of code there. So first up, what we've done is we've created our tokenizer. And in order to do that, we've written a new variable or created a new variable called tokenizer. And then we've set it equal to GPT2 tokenizer. And then we've used the from pre-trained method to load up our pre-trained GPT2-Large tokenizer. So in order to do that, if we read through the whole line, so it's tokenizer equals GPT2 tokenizer dot from pre-trained, and then we've passed through a parameter, which is GPT2-Large. So this effectively allows us to leverage the GPT2-Large model. Then we've also instantiated our model, and specifically what we've gone and done is we've used our GPT2 LM head model, which is what we imported up here. And again, we've used the from pre-trained model to load up our pre-trained model. And again, we've imported the GPT2-Large model. Now, if you get a out of memory error, or if you get something along those lines, you may want to use the non-large model, in which case you can just remove the -large, and this will allow you to load the smaller version of the model. But in this case, we're going to use the large model because it allows us to work and generate bigger, more sophisticated blocks of text. All right, then the next keyword parameter that we've passed through is the pad token ID. So this effectively represents what token is going to be used to pad our text. So if we actually take a look, what we've actually passed to that is tokenizer.eos token ID. So if we take a look at that, you can see that the token that's going to be used to pad our text is going to be token 5256. So if we went and decoded that, we should get an effective end of sentence word. So if we actually go and decode it, you can see that we're actually getting an end of text token. So this basically means that wherever we're trying to pad, we're effectively going to be replacing it with this end of text token. This decode method will go into a little bit more detail later on, but for now, just know that you can encode your text and you can also decode it. So if we take a look at that whole line that we've written there, so we've basically said model equals GPT2 LM head model dot from pre-trained, and then we've passed through GPT2-Large as the model that we want to load up, and then we've specified pad underscore token underscore ID equals tokenizer dot EOS token ID, and this basically represents end of sentence token ID. So that's the identifier for what token represents an end of a sentence. In this case, it was that number that you saw, and if we decode that, the word that's actually represented there is a set of brackets, some bars, and then end of text, and then the same on the other side. Okay, so that is our model and our tokenizer now loaded. Now, what we want to do in our next component is actually set up a sentence and then encode that using our tokenizer that we just set up here. So let's go on ahead and do it. Alrighty, so that is our sentence now tokenized. So what we've actually done there is written 2 lines of code. So first up, what we've gone and done is just created a standard Python string, and we've saved that inside of a variable called sentence. And that sentence is I like ice cream. Then what we've gone and done is use our tokenizer to encode that into a number of different identifiers. And these identifiers are going to be what we pass to our model that we set up just up here. So in order to do that, we've written tokenizer.encode, and then we've passed through our sentence, and then we've specified that we want to return our tenses as PyTorch tenses. And then we've saved that inside of a variable called input ID. So what we've effectively done is we've converted this we've converted this sentence here, which is I like ice cream, to these input IDs. Now, if we actually took, so we can see that we've got ID 40. So if we took ID 0, and ID 0 again, and we went and typed in tokenizer.decode and passed through that value, you can see that when we decode that number back, we're just getting the word I. Again, if we tried one of the other words, again, like the second word, again, is going to be ice. Third word or fourth word is going to be cream. So you can see that what we're effectively doing is converting this sentence into a number representation. And this is the way that our GPT-2 model likes receiving inputs. So that's the way that we're going to send it to it. Now, a key thing to note is that when our GPT-2 model generates our blog post, we're going to get a number of identifiers again. So what we're going to eventually have to do is use tokenizer.decode to decode our generated outputs. Now it's time to actually go on ahead and generate our blog post. Now you might have guessed that our blog post is going to be based on I like ice cream, but again, you could change this sentence and generate a bunch of other blog posts based on other topics. And we'll actually take a look at how to do that once we've gone and generated our first blog post. But on that note, it's now time to go on ahead and generate it. So let's do it. Alrighty, so that is our blog post now generated. Now we haven't actually output anything to the screen, but we'll come to that in a second. So what we've actually written there, let's just bring this back into the center so we can see that a little bit better. So what we've actually written there is one single line. So we've gone and written model.generate, which is using this model up here. And then we're passing through our input IDs and a number of other keyword parameters. But we'll come back to that in a second and actually delve a little bit deeper. Let's actually take a look at what has been generated. So if we type in output, we've got a number of identifiers. Because remember, we're passing through our input identifiers. What we're going to get back is a number of identifiers as well, or a number of IDs. So if we actually go and decode this now, you can see that we're actually getting a whole blog post. And again, this is quite a short blog post, but we're going to flesh this out in a second. So by decoding this output, we're actually getting back, I like ice cream sandwich, but I don't like it as much as I thought it would. It's not that I dislike it, it's just that it doesn't feel quite right to me. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to get used to it. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who love this new version of Android. Oh, because it's actually talking about ice cream sandwich, a version of Android. Interesting. But for me, I just can't get over the fact that Android 4 feels so different from and again, it stopped there. Interesting. So we've said ice cream and it's actually adapted that to ice cream sandwich, which is an Android version. Really, really interesting there. But you can sort of see that we've started to generate the beginning of a blog post. So let's take a step back and take a look at how this was actually done. And then we're actually going to update our topic and generate a slightly larger blog post. So in order to do this, we've written model.generate and we've passed through our input IDs, which we tokenized up here. Then we've specified the maximum length of the blog post that we want to generate or the text that we want to generate. Because keep in mind that although we're doing this to generate a blog post, you could actually generate a whole bunch of other different types of text. So we've set it to limit to 100 words. And then we've specified the number of beams. So in this particular case, we're actually using a technique called beam search to be able to go and search through and find the most appropriate next word in the sequence. And we've set the number of beams, so effectively how many search trees that we're going to have, to 5. We've also specified no underscore repeat underscore ngram underscore size equal to 2. So this particular parameter here basically stops our model from repeating certain sequences over and over again. Because sometimes when you actually go and repeat this, it'll get stuck on a certain probability for the next word and it'll just keep repeating. So in this case, we're stating that sequences of 2 can only repeat once. So basically this is going to stop our model repeating over and over. And we're specifying early stopping equals to true. So if we reach a point where we're not getting great outputs, it's going to stop generating. And in this case, it's gone and generated this blog post here. Now, if we wanted to, we could output this as well. So let's go on ahead and output it. And that is our lightweight blog post output. But again, we're going to flesh this out in a second. So what we've actually done there is we've used our tokenizer and we've decoded our output. So in order to do that, we've written text equals tokenizer.decode, because remember we've got an encode method which takes our sentences to our effectively our identifiers or our embedding, and then our decode statement which takes an existing set of identifiers or an embedding and converts it to its representative words. So what we're doing here is we're taking the output from our model, so tokenizer.decode, and then we're passing through that output, and we're grabbing the first value or the first part of our array. And then we're also passing through skip underscore special underscore tokens equals true, because we don't want to output the end of sentence tokens and other special tokens as well. We just want the words. And then what we've done is we've taken all of this and we've stored it inside of a variable called text. And then we've gone and used some standard Python functionality to go on ahead and write it out. So we've written with open blog post ice cream.text. We've specified that we want to write it out as f. And then we've used our file, so f.write, and then we've passed through text. So this is effectively going to generate a new blog post or a new text document called blog post ice cream.text. Should actually be txt. And we should be able to open this up. So if we go to the folder that we're in, you can see that we've got a bunch of documents. So this is the one that we wrote as text, T-E-X-T. We actually want this one. And you can see here that we've actually got our blog post or our lightweight sentence that we've actually gone and generated. Now, in this case, we've gone through an entire workflow and we've generated a lightweight blog post. But what happens if we wanted to generate something a little bit more substantial? So say, for example, we wanted to use a different sentence as our input. Well, what we can do is actually just replace this sentence here and we should be able to generate a new blog post. Now, in this particular case, the sentence that I'm going to use is actually driven from an existing blog post that I saw. So it actually comes from this Hacker Noon article, which talks about how no-code tools need to be able to adapt to specialists that are already operating within that field. Now, in this particular case, what we're going to do is really just use this input into our model. So no-code needs to adapt to specialists. So if we paste that in there, what we should effectively be able to do is generate a new blog post simply from that statement, or at least some text out of it. So if we run this, then take a look at our tokenizer. So again, we've gone and tokenized that by deleting those three. So again, our tokenizer is converting it to input IDs, and if we decode it, we're getting our sentence back. Now, the other change that we're also going to make is that we're going to change our maximum length. So rather than having 100, we're going to change this up to 500. So ideally, we should be able to generate something a little bit more substantial than just this line here. So let's go on ahead and run this. Now, it may take a little bit of time to run because it is going through a number of different processes and quite a sophisticated model to be able to generate a significant blog post. So let's go on ahead and run this and see what we get out.
5 minutes later.
And there you go. So we've now gone and generated a significantly more substantial blog post. So if you actually take a look, you can see that we're generating a whole heap of additional tensors. And right down here, we're getting our full blog post. So in this case, if we actually take a look at the blog post, so no code needs to adapt to specialists, and it's actually appended a question mark, which we didn't have up here. And then if we read a little bit further, so I'm not sure what the answer is to this question, but I think it's a good question to ask yourself. If you're an expert in a particular area, then you should be able to adapt your code to the needs of specialists in that area. But if you don't know what your specialty is, you shouldn't have to worry about it. You should just write your code that works for you. And if it doesn't work, that's your problem, not the specialist problem. Interesting there. So if I were to write a function that takes a string and converts it to a number, I wouldn't worry too much about whether it would work for a specialist in the field of number theory. I would write the function in such a way that it could be used by anyone who wanted to use it, regardless of whether they knew anything about numbers or not. In other words, my function would be a general purpose function, which means that I could write it in any language I wanted. I mean, you can see there that it's actually writing some stuff that's particularly relevant. I mean, it's talking about programming languages, it's talking about the construct between specialists and non-specialists, and it's going through and actually generating something that's quite substantial. So if we actually take a look at the length of our output, so len output 0, you can see that it's hit right up to the maximum output length of our generated blog post. Now again, if we wanted to, we could output this out as well. So we'll probably call this one specialist.text. And if we take a look in our folder, again, you can see that we've now gone and output our next blog post. So that about wraps up how to actually go and use the NLP Hugging Face model to generate blog posts. So we did quite a fair bit there. So again, we installed and imported our dependencies, and specifically, we started working with GPT-2. We took a look at how our tokenizer allows us to encode and decode our sentences. So remember, we encode it before we send it to our model, and then we decode the outputs from our model. Then what we went and did is we actually went and generated some text using the model.generate method, and then we decoded that output. And we used some small inputs to be able to generate a small block of text, and then we also increased our max length to be able to generate a slightly longer blog post. And again, we can output that pretty easily using some standard Python functionality. And that about wraps it up. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and tick that bell so you get notified of when I'm releasing future videos. And let me know what types of blog posts you are generating. Thanks again for tuning in. Peace.